Well, hello everyone. I wish I could see you, but hello everybody, and welcome to the Book Industry Guild's February program, Health and Wellness in 2021. My name is Karen Romano, and I am the current president of the Book Industry Guild of New York. Multiple challenges of the past year have made physical, mental, and even spiritual wellness part of an ongoing conversation that presents multidimensional opportunities in the publishing environment. And we are very fortunate to have with us tonight some influential voices in this space to talk to us about wellness publishing, upcoming trends, and how they are representing marginalized communities. With that, I am very excited to introduce our moderator for this evening, Latoya Shauntay Snell. Latoya was noted by the Root 100 as one of the most influential African Americans ages 25 to 45. She is a sponsored endurance athlete, body politics activist, motivational speaker, and content creator. A food and fitness blogger, a running fat chef. She was featured on multiple platforms such as Third Hour Today, Good Morning America, Huffington Post, and on the November 2020 cover of Runner's World. Ms. Snell is changing the narrative of ideal body types, mental health, and fitness stereotypes in the fitness and wellness space. As a contributing writer for several platforms and an ambassador for the Runners Alliance Initiative, she uses her voice to talk about intersectionality in sports to change the language for future generations in fitness and beyond. So again, thank you so much for joining us, and I'm turning it over, Latoya, to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining today's session. My name is Latoya Shauntay Snell, as already mentioned. I am so excited to be able to kickstart this February event, especially since it's centered around health and wellness. And today we actually have three panelists. And today I will be your moderator for this event. And I would like to actually go down the line in their bios. Dervla Kelly is the executive editor of Penguin Random House, acquiring books for Rodale and 10 Speed imprints, and working specifically in the food and lifestyle space. For Rodale, she has acquired some of the imprint's best-selling titles, including Kristen Calavari, New York Times best-selling cookbooks True Roots and True Comfort, Charlene Flanagan's, and Elise Kopecki's Run Fast, Eat Slow publishing program, and Catherine Taylor's cookbook, Love Real Food. She is constantly on the lookout for books with a unique message of wellness and healing through food. Dervla lives in Berkeley, California with her family, and you can also find her as Dervla Kelly on Instagram. Secondly, I'd like to introduce Andrew Flach. He's a publisher at Hatherleigh Press, which is dedicated to publishing reliable and authoritative content in healthy living. Hatherleigh encourages active and healthy lifestyles, involvement in family and community, earth-friendly choices, and mindful awareness of the interconnectedness of all things. Lastly, I would love to introduce Lisa Cheng. She is recently promoted to executive editor at Hay House Incorporated, where she focuses on the mind, body, spirit, health, wellness, and in business. She has had the pleasure of working with such authors as Russell Brunson, Kerry Richardson, Beatrice Shojai, Nikki Nash, and Joy Barr. She has previously worked at HarperCollins Children's Books, Simon and Schuster Children's Publishing, and Running Press Kids. So I would like to say thank you and welcome for coming to this panel to be able to offer your insight and to answer a couple of maybe a little bit of a heavy hitter questions that actually through your direction. So if everyone will just kind of turn on their mics, make sure that you have it on here, and a little bit of housekeeping rules just for everyone that's actually tuning in today. I invite you to actually use the question and answer button that's actually probably at the bottom of your screens, depending on where you're actually listening from. You can press at the bottom. At the bottom of the screen, you're more than welcome to throw out any type of question that you have that comes to mind at any point of the section. At the end of the session, around 6:45 roughly, I'll start to pick some of the questions and we'll try to get through as many as possible. And of course, if you're coming into this a little bit late, no worries. In about a week's time, we'll be able to actually show the video. It will be available on the Book Industry Guild of New York's website, and they will provide that information to you at a future date. So let's actually get started. So for each question that I actually provided for all of the panelists, I'm going to actually go in the same way that I kind of read everyone's bios. I'm going to go in alphabetical order. And of course, no pressure. We're going to probably deviate just a little bit depending on how passionate we actually get into some of these topics. So let's actually go for the first question. For me, for a great amount of time, I realized that gyms were closed. People started working out remotely from home, and an increase of new runners and cyclists emerged from a period of darkness. So, as we still push through these periods and encouraging others to remain active, are any of you noting an increased demand in running and cycling education? And if so, what topics are actually coming to mind? Maybe even any authors that we should be looking out for in 2020. And I would love to actually start off that question. Haha. I would like to start off that question off with Dervla.
Hi, I'm
Hi.
Dervla Kelly. So, I was in thinking about this a lot. I know I live here in Berkeley and I see people running and cycling past my door constantly in California. It doesn't seem like it's increased for me just because life out here in California is so outdoorsy anyway that it doesn't feel like it's ticked up. But I can tell in the types of submissions that I'm getting just over this past year. I know that so for a little bit of background, I acquire for both 10-speed and Rodale, but on the Rodale side is where I see most of the health titles. And what we're seeing are a huge increase in definitely running, cycling too, but I would say running for sure. I think there's been a lot of attention on the running community lately, especially the women's running community, and the conversations around camaraderie and kinship and friendship that evolve as you run. So I think what we're seeing are a ton of actually running memoirs lately, lots and lots of them coming through the doors. One that I was particularly excited about that we are not publishing, and I forget who's lucky enough to be publishing it, but Lauren Fleshman, a professional runner who submitted a proposal that generated quite excitement on our end anyway, and we were very into it. And I loved her story. We've seen it covered in the Times a lot recently of gender inequities in running, and analysis of Nike and what's been going on there. And Lauren Fleshman was really digging into that in her book. So that's one that I'm super looking forward to. I forget what it's called now. I should have looked that up. Not Born to Run, but something similar. Anyway, but yes, a huge uptick in running books. I think we're on the lookout for a few cyclists too. I know Peloton saw a huge increase in their business in last year, and so we're seeing a lot of motivational cyclists, emerge as well.
Awesome. Like I'm so glad to actually hear some of those names. I actually am very, very familiar with them, and I'm very passionate about the things that they do. As we as we hit into 2020, it felt like we were almost smacked with several different types of pandemics. Of course, I like to make light of it, even though it's not a laughing matter. I like to say that we've been plagued with the murder hornets, as well as things that's more on the serious note of COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
The racial and xenophobic conversations have definitely, we've seen an increase and an uptick in conversations as well as protests. And in ways we kind of look at fitness as a therapeutic tool in so many ways. So to kind of transition into speaking about using running as a muse, I would love to actually offer that same question to Andrew as well.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, not only running has been sort of on the uptick, but I would say, everybody's been forced, because the gyms are closed, to work out at home. So or find other ways to get fit. I mean, going out hiking into the parks, or getting on a bicycle, or jumping rope, or doing some other kind of activity outside of the gym environment. So we've seen in our lines an uptick in those kind of titles. We have sort of almost a prescriptive line of workout collections, so that you can sort of grab and go depending upon whatever it is you want to do. So we have a fantastic jump rope workout book by the world's top jump roper, Buddy Lee. We also came out last summer with a book on rowing. So for people who have ergometers, that's another like Peloton type home workout device. 101 best rowing workouts. So, and then we also have a backlist of military fitness, or like exercises for for people who want to sort of go a little more hardcore. And so Stuart Smith, who's a former Navy SEAL, has been with us as an author for many, many years. And so his workouts have been extremely popular, and they're challenging. I also think that another theme that has come up in this past year or two is also the endurance athlete. I know, Latoya, this is your passion.
Yes.
And I commend you. I just, quickly that I've been looking at some of your blog posts, and the one today that you posted. You write some really, truly hard-hitting stuff, really great, really insightful. So grateful for that. And definitely the endurance type sport. This is where we've been seeing, there are obviously some very popular books out there, but we've been seeing more submissions this way, and also submissions about sort of the resiliency of the athletic life. What does it mean to be an athlete? What does it mean to sort of transition from, one period of your life as an athlete to another period, and to how to keep your wits about you when sometimes your competitive life goes away. So, and especially since people are really dependent on that, the sort of the accolades and the stature of athletics, what happens when that familiarity is shifted. So no, definitely there's, huge popularity in fitness titles over the last 18 months, and no end in sight for that.
I definitely agree, and that wholeheartedly resonates with me. Not to take up too much time, but in my own personal, transition into 2020, and now even in 2021, I do find myself doing more home-based workouts. Something that maybe even in 2019 and years before, some of my fellow athletes looked at me and they kind of laughed at the idea that I did so much cross training versus actually being out there on the road. For me, I just mentally felt much better. But now, as we're now heading into almost a year of of battling, COVID-19 globally. It is very easy to almost feel a little bit nostalgic about where we were before all of this happened, to feel overwhelmed by some of the feelings, to almost go through a little bit of cabin fever in a sense, where we're kind of stuck and contained in one place to do these workouts. So I definitely feel like the home-based workouts is going to resonate with so many people who feel a bit limited, especially if they're in a restricted space where maybe you're just renting out a room, or if you're a fellow New Yorker where you do have a full apartment or maybe a floor or two, but the space is not as open as you want it to be. I kind of, I feel for all of us during this period, and I want to be able to open up that opportunity to extend that to Lisa Cheng to elaborate just a little bit more, maybe even touching on from a parental standpoint. I happen to be a parent myself, and I've been watching the anxiety rise, not just on my own end, but I've been watching it from my son's perspective. And it's really hard to kind of get him engaged into the outdoors. What have you been seeing on your end?
Well, it's so funny you mentioned that outdoors. I mean, clearly fitness books are strong and in figuring out ones that work at home, and for us, like a lot of yoga and all of that. But really what I've actually seen a lot of submissions about are things that have to do with nature and getting in touch. And it might be just also, I might see it more just because of what my house does. But getting in touch with yourself through that, your soul through that. Like I've seen a few birding submissions. We acquired a book by a birder, and it's funny when I was talking about it and pitching it to the group. I told them it reminded me of a running memoir, sort of how she describes how she has her, religious experience of sorts through that, and finds her peace through that. So I think figuring out how you can connect with yourself, and tends to be a more solitary activity. Like I think I'm seeing that, or like nature bathing or things like that.
That's actually refreshing. Like right now, a huge thing I've noticed, I personally noticed in a lot of news reports in regards to nature is that at the very beginning of COVID-19, where a lot of places were actually placed into almost like a sort of quarantine and a lockdown, that the air and the environment actually changed within a matter of weeks because there wasn't as much pollution. We can't help but notice how some of those things actually change when we're, as humans, unfortunately, are disrupting the environment in a sense. It does make me kind of question what our new normal, because we are still like, the term is heavily used these days, referring to the new normal, but we actually don't know exactly what that is. And I strongly believe that by the day we are creating the new normal, maybe the new normal will actually include masks as a mandatory thing. Maybe there will be some type of things that we'll have to rethink environmentally, maybe spiritually, maybe even fitness wise, or on when it comes down to race day events like running and cycling. These are definitely heavy hitter things to think about. So with that being said, if there's anything else that anybody wants to add before we actually move on.
No, I just wanted to chime in and say I really agree with Lisa there on the birding as a solitary activity that is completely perfect for for social distancing. It's like we're seeing those kinds of submissions as well. And yeah, on the 10-speed side, we're seeing more of the forest bathing and the walking out in nature. And then on the Rodale side, we're seeing more of the prescriptive health books. But either way, people are finding non-traditional ways to get mental clarity and rest for their minds. And even if it's just like stepping to the side of my desk and doing 15 push-ups or something, there's a myriad of ways that you can work out just in the space that you're standing in. And it's something we never thought of before, and we never had to think of it before because we had commutes and we had gyms and we had reasons to be moving in and out of the house. And now our home is also our gym.
Right. I definitely agree. In so many ways, as we think about, moving in the outdoors, and it's, very interesting that birding is something, birding or bird watching essentially is something that's brought up because it actually shifts into a little bit of a major concern, and something that's actually that we cannot avoid, that was heavily discussed in 2020. Now, I can definitely attest to hearing this narrative, a narrative that I often hear as a runner, as an ultra runner, and as an outdoor enthusiast, is that the outdoors is for everyone. We've heard this term so many times, but as cliche as it sounds, that doesn't always feel like the case. People from various marginalized backgrounds and populations oftenly, they openly speak about not feeling safe while navigating the outdoors, particularly as a woman, while trans, even while Black, Latinx, or even Indigenous, in ways, as much as I love these things, I know personally, and I even have a myriad of stories of how innocent moments go wrong. How do we empower athletes that's part of these marginalized communities? And do you actually have any books that might be, that might actually exist already, or something that might be in the works of talking about things like runner safety, or any authors that's actually particularly touching on these sensitive subjects? I know that one of the authors that I heard mentioned was Laura Freshman, and I know Alison Desir Mariella is actually developing a book. So with those things, hitting close to home, I wonder what are your opinions on that particular subject?
Should I go first?
Yes, I'm so sorry. Yes,
no, that's fine. That's fine.
I'm looking at you on the monitor. And
yeah, sorry. I don't think Rodale has any current publishing on, say, runner safety. If you're coming from, a marginalized community. But I think it's an incredible idea, and I think it's important publishing. And the ways that we're trying to reach all of the different communities of runners, because not every runner is white, is that we're starting to publish different voices, diverse voices. We publish Mev Keflezgi, the ultra champion marathon runner, and while his book does not specifically discuss racism that he faced or stereotypes that he came up against, I think continuing to publish diverse voices in the community will help to inspire others to know that it's not just running is not just an activity, or any kind of fitness is not just an activity for one specific group of people, but is something that is welcome and open to all. I think it's really it's a tough question. It's tough work to do, and I just hope and pray that I continue to get submissions that allow us to change that narrative, and to see authors and champion that authors with diverse voices from diverse communities that really will reach the full breadth of our readers and our audience. So nothing that I can actually think of right now, but it's an incredible idea, and one that I hope we will all be publishing into soon.
Absolutely agree. The thing is, like, I always like to note, is that, sometimes, even as we, especially with 2020, we heard so many stories of pain, particularly from the African American community, from, the Latinx community, from the Asian American community, which sometimes I feel like they don't get enough coverage, especially with the rise and the uptick of xenophobia. What I also remind people is that diverse stories are not only important to hear about the hardships, but to hear about the joy. So that's the reason why I, as much as we do know these things exist, it is refreshing to hear and read stories like Meb, where it doesn't have to directly focus on the dark parts of the Black experience, or the experience of being biracial or anything of that nature, but to actually have those stories out there. It shows some type of visual and written form of diversity and inclusion. I would love to actually shift that the same question over to Andrew.
It's interesting. I'm going to commend you for putting together some really targeted discussion points for tonight. And I think that I think you're ahead of the trend. You're really seeing things and speaking about things on your site that are really just coming to light in the minds of many people, including people writing, putting those thoughts into more expanded content. So I would say for sure, just the stimulation of conversations like this, which are so essential and so important, they'll bring new light to publishers, to others in the publishing community, to inspire them to, again, be more inclusive and diverse in their stories and their narratives. But also, I just think we have a book coming up very specifically about takeaways from being an endurance athlete. And I'm thinking this is another place where we can even have a conversation with our author and see about bringing some of these themes into that book specifically. So I think it's really, really on target. I mean, it was sort of funny because when I was also thinking that it raised in my mind some other challenges and questions, because you know, not, and I think today your article specifically was about, you know, that safety factor, you know, in my mind when I read that. And I was thinking, well, you know, what about running groups? And you address that, you know, because those bring their own challenges. You know, how do you feel in a club or running group? So the challenge I see also is access to the outdoors, not just safety in the outdoors,
right,
but access. And then, like, for example, I live in the upstate New York Catskill region. But, you know, people, you know, who have means can get in a car and drive up and go to the, you know, for a nice little country outing. But what about all the other people that may not have that access? And I think that's an important conversation point, something we need to think about, and something, you know, that again lends an opportunity for thought and narrative. And I also wanted to add, just in particularly, just as a suggestion to put it out there, the Outward Bound organization, which is an educational, experiential educational school throughout the world, they have schools throughout the world, really targets marginalized communities and provides these kind of very experiences to bring them from the urban centers or other places and bring them in safety to the wilderness to have pure nature experiences. So not that that's a publishing story, but it's an organization I'm very familiar with and have worked with in the past. I've been on 3 of their courses and know some of the instructors. And I think that is a great opportunity. I don't know, again, how it informs publishing, I'm not sure, but they do provide terrific outlets for experiences in the outdoors for marginalized communities. So very important group.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. Lisa, would you like to add on to that?
Sure. I think I'd really like to speak to Dervla's point as an editor and as an editor who acquires. The best thing I can do professionally is to get that representation and get the voices on the list. And to make sure those voices feel safe, feel heard, and have the freedom to say that they have felt this discomfort, that they have felt this if they want to, if that's what they want to go into. You know, the birding book I was talking about, that is by a Black author, and she said, it's a woman named Tamma Watson. She has said that one of the drivers of wanting to do a book is so that she can add that feeling of welcome to a community that she felt hesitant about beforehand, and has found it to be a lovely community, you know, but she speaks to the challenges and the hesitations that she has had. And I think it's also just how I edit the works, and how, even when I'm acquiring, how upfront I am about, you know, we talk to a lot of authors who already have businesses and who already have brands, and just to speak to the diversity in their audience and how they're reaching out too. So it's not just, I mean, it sort of seeks the whole diversity conversation and inclusion conversation. It isn't just one thing. And in order to make it successful, you really have to look at it on all levels, from how you market your books, who you're acquiring, who you're hiring, everything. So
I think it heavily speaks to, you know, like as we talk about safety, it almost, and even like, you know, the kind of almost pivot a bit, it almost focuses on how do we actually make people feel safe and vulnerable enough to share those stories. You know, like, how do we actually, you know, as an editor, how, like, you know, pardon me for actually asking the question that's actually not there, but how do we actually, you know, get people to feel vulnerable enough to share certain layers when they're writing these books, you know, to not get to a place where they're kind of shelling out everything, but we can, you know, as a person who wants to write and publish a book, you know, in the near future, you know, how do you get to that place where we actually make the author feel comfortable enough to be vulnerable with an audience of who knows how many people will pick up these books? And that's actually
I'd like to address that one.
Yes,
I think for me, it starts with them becoming comfortable enough with me. Like Lisa said, just, you know, constant, lots of conversations. So it begins with that initial acquisitions call to even see if the book is a right fit for us. And I will say that one of quite a few positive things that have come out of the pandemic, but one of the main positive things for me has actually been this kind of Zoom interaction that I'm having with people. So whereas beforehand, my acquisitions calls with authors and agents would just be on the phone, and unless they were in the California area and coming into the 10-speed offices to meet with me, they would not know who I was or anything about me. And I find that conversations now over Zoom with authors and with agents, we just are able to relate to each other so much more. We can look at each other in the eye, talk face to face. And those kinds of things, I think, really, really help an author to feel comfortable and vulnerable and to be able to share. So once I have that relationship established with an author, that starts off in that very beginning call. I mean, every editor has a different way of working, but I tend to become very, very close with them. We have a lot of conversations. We become friends. We text. And I find that my authors, you know, my Black authors who were specifically, obviously, very affected by, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement and everything that's been going on, as everyone else in the world should be also, but they were feeling it, I think, a little more keenly. Those people I checked in with extra often, quite often, making sure everyone was, you know, doing okay. They didn't have to talk to me if they didn't want to, but I was here, just behind the scenes, ready to support whatever I can do, but without being annoying and in their face about it. But, you know, I'm not trying to force anyone to speak about these issues, but just wanted them to know that, you know, as a representative of Penguin Random House and the Rodale and 10-speed imprints, we were behind them all the way, supporting them, ready to, you know, give them extra time with their manuscripts, whatever they needed to get through, because I know it was a tough mental time for everyone. So yeah, I think in that way, especially for authors of color, we were extra just attentive.
Definitely great. Did anyone else want to actually chime in as well? Because I do actually have a question actually in regards to that area. Because a lot of what a lot of us actually notice is that there's a lot of commentary that's really focused and centered around the many pandemics, essentially. You know, we can't look over, you know, the losses, the devastating losses of Ahmaud Arbery, you know, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and not just limiting it to Black voices or Black people who lost. We're talking about the uptick in transphobia, xenophobia, you know, the racism, you know, that's happening. And as we speak about, you know, being vulnerable enough to share those stories, it does make me question, you know, for each of you, what are your publishing home's stances on, you know, movements like Black Lives Matter or, you know, and the uptick in racism, and just to kind of center it here in America, not so much on a global perspective. What are your stances on it? Dervla, would you like to go again, or would you like me to actually kind of like give you a little bit of time and I can ask Andrew that question?
No, that's okay. We could talk about this. I think we said this in our intro call that we had last week. We could talk about this particular question,
yes,
for hours, and I would love to. So I feel like it should be a separate panel as well.
Yes.
This is obviously has defined 2019 and 2020 for me. I, as part of the 10-speed and Rodale teams, we stand, of course, with the Black Lives Matter movement and are very passionate about all of that. And how we are incorporating that into our work is a commitment to hire more diverse people. But also what we're doing is we're being very, very selective about the freelancers that we work with. So from copy editors to proofreaders to indexers, we're actually trying to source, you know, say I have a book on Nigeria, I'm trying to look for only Black copy editor, Black proofreader, Black indexer to work on that book, preferably from one of the African countries, if at all possible, from Nigeria. It's very, very narrow pool then that I'm looking for freelancers, but we're making every possible effort to do that, to really hire freelancers that most accurately reflect the books that we're putting out. We also are committed to having audience readers read our manuscripts if a manuscript is not is about a culture but is not by an author from that culture. We're committed to having readers, who are from that culture read the manuscript to make sure that we're accurately reflecting details, and then, if at all possible, in general, publishing writers that come from those cultures to begin with, so that we don't have to, so that we're coming from a place of authenticity, if at all possible, and then publishing books that help answer these questions, that help deal with racism, that we talked about earlier, about publishing more diverse faces so that people feel comfortable coming into certain types of fitness and activities. I mean, we need to value wellness for all groups of people. Wellness is not one color or belongs to one group. It belongs to everyone, and we're trying to reflect that not only in the authors of the books but also in the team that works on them behind the scenes, including the photographer. We are starting a process of crediting everybody publicly on the copyright page so that everyone behind the scenes of a book is credited appropriately. I mean, I think there's far too much that goes into a book that is not just the editor and the publisher and the photographer and the author. There's a giant team of production and managing editorial and art and design, that mailroom that goes into the making of a book and what it takes. So we're trying to credit as many people as possible in that process too. And then I would also say, I feel like I'm getting a little off topic too, but I feel like it kind of applies. We're also looking in non-traditional arenas for books too, that more accurately reflect the diversity of our authors. So places like TikTok and YouTube and all of those places that are exploding now with younger, more diverse authors that are finding an audience to reach. So we're looking in all of those places as well for people to publish.
As a content creator, I absolutely thank you, not just for looking outside of, the norm of looking outside, looking into places like YouTube and TikTok and all these social media channels, but as a diverse artist myself, as a photographer, as a writer, as a content creator on these social media channels, it's important. It's imperative that people are given credit. It is how other people are able to land future positions, how they're able to show and tell their work. It is their living and breathing resume. And sometimes, my heart aches, now as I am in front of the camera more often than I am behind the camera or, behind the scenes, that this is something that a lot of people do have as a major concern, from the makeup artist to that, that was on a set, to the person who is helping the editor, wondering, where exactly is my credit? It's great to receive that paycheck, but it is much more, especially when you're a creative, it is much more than just receiving that paycheck. It is rewarding to be able to see your name and say, yes, I did that and I was part of that moment, and to be able to be acknowledged and honored around your peers. Andrew, I would love to bring that question over to you.
Well, no, well answered by both of you and well spoken. I mean, we've always promoted diversity and inclusion. That's, that goes without saying. And with regards to violence and racism, there's no place for it in the Black community or other communities. So totally supportive of that. A lot of our work, and actually the origin of our company, is from medical education. And the medical education we focus on is mental health, behavioral medicine. And so a lot of these subjects and themes are constantly being voiced in our medical education aspect. So, issues such as, trauma and how it impacts individuals, and this through the eye of the professional. So we've been, for the last 40 years, educating around these themes to professionals in the United States. So it kind of is part of who we are, just, having to kind of pick up a lot of the emotional and other trauma-based issues and informing both professionals and consumers that way. So it's really important to us. It's important to me. And and I think I would agree with Dervla. I mean, we really have to revision our country and the responsibility we have to each other, and also to, how we address health and well-being. I think we're not a very healthy country. I think we don't think well. We certainly don't eat well. Most of us aren't doing anything. So these are, vital discussion points, and, things that impact everyone. And as a health publisher, we're small. So, we publish maybe 20 to 30 titles a year. So this is very different than the Rodales or the Hay Houses and so on. So we're really, a much more a targeted publisher. And, by that, so we, a lot of these themes are in there. We don't have a specific project in response to the events of last year, but we actually have one we're working on probably for the 2022 season. So if we can get one book out there that has real value and meaning, that to us is equally important.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Lisa, would you like to add on?
Sure. Black Lives Matter. That
Yes.
needs to be said, and it is in our mission statement now online if you want to look at it. So it is something we support. And yeah, it's hard to go third, I think, with this, because Dervla and Andrew have spoken so well to the point. I think how we're trying to address it, again, like as I spoke, it really is being conscious about acquisitions, being honest. Like we did a whole percentage thing and being like, what percentage is broken down? And it was hard to look at those numbers and to be like, what do we want to achieve? How are we going to do it? Having a lot of I think honest, like it is 2019 2020 has made more people familiar with more conversations, or more open to them, or less or engaging people more in those conversations. So that happens in a variety of ways, again, sort of in every department, as Dervla was saying, like, who are you hiring as your freelancers? Who's looking at this? So all of those things, how are we looking at the covers? How are we evaluating that? So it's a lot of that in-house work, which I think that's been a lesson, like you can acquire, but that's not going to show up for a while, on your list. You can do the work in-house, but it's a slow process, because I mean, every house has its own machinations, but like every house has its processes, and in order to have people re-examine it in every level, it's a slow process. It's a slow process that needs to be faster. But the reality is, in order to change something, it's something that takes work. So I think it's just committing to that long haul, and that's something that I think we've been doing as a house, to try to figure out how can we do it in a way that will resonate and last, and keep getting better and better.
Absolutely. And the thing is, like, you make a valid point. These things, like, right now, as we watch the uptick in these conversations, as we watch how these conversations have progressed, and everyone is asking, well, what about this population? What about the older population? What about the plus size community? What about these, almost intersectionality at its play? And it's like everything is blowing over at the same time. We have to be mindful to remind people that these things didn't happen overnight. So as these things that haven't happened overnight, I won't say so much as we need to have patience. I would say that maybe we just need a little bit more grace, a little bit more grace for everyone across the board, and to acknowledge that we all have some type of unconscious bias that exists. Is not something that is limited to a particular race or a background, that we all have these unconscious biases. And instead of looking at it from, well, this is a publishing house, maybe we have to look at it from an individual perspective of what is bouncing back at us at the mirror. What is it telling us directly? And what are the things that we haven't had to consider, maybe because of an environmental difference, maybe because of an upbringing difference? So I think that during these times that we have to be not only hopeful, but have just a little bit more grace and patience, because as much as we want to see these changes, we want to make sure we do it right. In the culinary industry, what I would always hear from my instructors is do it right or do it twice. And the thing is, America's been doing it more than twice. We've been doing it over and over again. In order for us to be able to move forward, we have to look back and acknowledge here were the mistakes, here are the things that can be corrected, and this is going to be something that's going to happen over time and maybe even beyond us being here. To actually
I think
shift,
that's beautifully said. Beautifully said.
thank you. To actually shift into actually another part of intersectionality. As maybe people cannot tell because I'm on Zoom, I am actually a plus size athlete, and I am mostly noted for my work in discussions about body positivity, intersectionality, and size diversity. And oftentimes people like me don't feel as if we have a place in these discussions about health and wellness without being gaslit with phrases like promoting obesity. Is one of those things that I hear often, despite me being exceptionally active. In 2021 and 2022, can we expect to see any type of writers discussing these personal experiences of navigating through those feelings, as well as fostering some type of healthy dialogue about food and active lifestyles, perhaps even embracing their own bodies without it feeling so heavily associated to things like weight loss? I would love to start that. I'm actually going to take that in reverse order. And I start that off with Lisa.
I would say yes. I mean, we've already see it in some of the titles we have, in our list now, but it's definitely a refreshing growing trend to see a lot less focused on the weight and the number, but the experience. And again, particularly with Hay House, it's always about what is your mindset, what is the well-being and the true well-being, not just the weight on the scale. So I think, again, sort of like everything with the past year has, I think, brought the importance of that connection to the forefront because everyone is struggling. So it's more, I think, again, sort of like when you're talking about things that have come out from the past year, how that affects it. Like we see a lot more interest in our books on trauma. Like that's a key word that, you know, pops up with our SEO when we're looking at things that people are searching for with the different meditations or different things on our site. So yeah, I think that is a trend that is hopefully not a trend, but something that's a reality that will stick.
Definitely. Let's, Andrew, would you like to add on to that?
Well, sure. I mean, number one, I would say when you asked that question, it almost didn't feel congruent in my mind because that's not how I see it. I mean,
Right.
and as Lisa was saying, so it's a shame that people would even suggest that you're, promoting obesity. I don't even get that. I mean, again, looking at your site, you're a role model of an active person living a passionate life. I mean, that's a great gift. And you tell that story every day with your blog. I'd like to also, of course, mention, I brought a friend, just wanted to say hi.
Yes.
David Goggins,
Love him.
and it taps back into what Lisa was saying about, the lockdowns and the isolation has really forced us to go inward. And I actually have my go inward
I
shirt
love
on.
it. I
Because
love
that's
it.
where the work has to be done. But that's really where the opportunity lies. I think we've tried everything. And, without fixing ourselves and really looking deep inside to see where we can improve and have that growth mindset, I think that's really where the future, is promising for us. And so that's, and that's been a passion of our publishing as well. So as Lisa was saying, they're focused on, trauma and so on. We actually have an author, Erica Spiegelman, terrific, Rewired Life. These kind of books and these kind of examinations really provide so much value. And I think that that's the encouragement we have for this coming, 2021 is to really help people go inward, do that examination, see where they want to grow and go forward. So a lot of opportunity there.
Awesome. Dervla, would you like to contribute?
Yeah, I'll add to it from the food perspective, because cookbooks are mostly what I'm working on. But I think, in the past, Rodale may have been known for strict diet books or calorie counting books like South Beach Diet or Wheat Belly, all of these like very successful franchises that have done really well. But I think that what we're seeing in recent years, and certainly what I've been working on, are more kind of intuitive eating. So vegetarian, vegan cookbooks that are just kind of naturally healthy, because they're teaching you to get back in the kitchen and not to be eating packaged food. And it feels like eating that way is inherently healthier, because you're making it yourself and you're taking the time to look at the ingredients, and you're not using packaged ingredients. So we're seeing books that are moving away from that kind of diet culture, and even within the recipes that I'm working on, we're seeing like nothing about the calorie counts, or even the portion sizes, I think, need to be looked at and talked about, and just have vague servings perhaps, because I'm not trying to make anyone feel bad when they're looking at a recipe and say, oh, that serves 8. Well, maybe it really doesn't. So we're taking a hard look at everything like that on our recipe end. And then, yeah, like I said, just seeing a lot of intuitive eating. I have several books on the 10-speed list that are from people who have previously battled eating disorders and now are just trying to come out of it and live a healthy life, but not in a restricted way. And then on the Rodale side, what I'm seeing are athlete cookbooks, like you mentioned, the Shalane Flanagan and Elise Kopecky authors that I publish, the Run Fast, Eat Slow series, where it's about, when you're training at that kind of high level, you can kind of eat, a ton of butter and a ton of fish. But what they're saying is that is really just a myth now, that you just because you're training at a really high level, you can eat whatever you want, but that things like butter and avocado oil and healthy fats are good for you, and that you should be eating a lot of those, and that carbs are good, and just as long as you're making it yourself, you're using whole ingredients, you're not using packaged processed food, then it will be healthier for you. So that's kind of what we're seeing, is a turn away from strict calorie counting and more about overall health and wellness as it relates to food.
That is absolutely refreshing for me to hear. And it's actually a great place for me to jump into the questions and the answers that's actually left. I see there's 2 questions that's left here. But before we actually go into that, I heavily appreciate all of you for being able to not only just represent your publishing houses, but to show me a portion of yourself. It is heavily appreciated, especially on behalf of the communities that I represent. I am a person who suffers from an eating disorder. I am a person who is part of a marginalized community. And sometimes the world is incredibly rough. Sometimes it can feel overwhelming and defeating. And when you compile that with dealing with the challenges of COVID-19, so many people who are still kind of stuck in that mindset of, I have to calorie count, while dealing with others who may, especially on social media, where people may shame you for not upkeeping or looking like the next person on the screen. There are times where I've watched people compare and contrast even my own workouts, and they're like, wow, you're really killing it. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, and I'm like, it's just the way that you're looking at it, perception. So it's really encouraging to hear those words, come from leaders like you guys, to be able to, to remind people that everybody's different, and that is perfectly okay. So with that being said, I would love to go into the questions and answers. Let's see. Okay, so the first question that I see here, are you seeing books related to healthy aging coming out? I would like to open that to anyone that would like to answer that. I'll repeat that again. Are you all seeing books related to healthy aging coming out? Oh, I think that's a no.
I don't think we have any on our list, but it's a good idea.
Yeah,
Yes.
we have one in development, but it's not yet been announced.
Okay. Lisa?
Yeah, I wouldn't say healthy aging, but again, it can be kind of inherent toward the target audience. So certain authors, maybe different ages, and on what you would consider like in the 50s and 60s and or plus. And so I don't believe we have any specifically on healthy aging coming out, which is going to make me feel so guilty if we do. But but again, like I think I think overall that's what we try to do when we're trying to think about things. It's not the trends, but who we have on the list and the diversity of voices and age and everything else too. So.
Mm. And I actually see another question that actually popped in. Let's see if I can actually pull this one up. We often talk about diversity and inclusion within publishing, but a group that often gets included in this discussion are stories by and about people with disabilities. I love to see books about runners or endurance athletes that are by athletes with disabilities, or even unseen health conditions like lupus, diabetes, or other autoimmune illnesses who have managed to overcome physical difficulties and succeed in a world that often dismisses them. Do any of your publishing programs actively look for books by authors with disabilities? And if so, why not? That is, that one actually sticks to my heart. Anyone would like to take that one on?
Easily, I would just answer, we would welcome those kind of submissions. Sounds like, important material. If they're not really well covered, then they need to be covered. So for sure.
Awesome.
I
Yeah.
will say that on the 10-speed side, we have a book on disabilities coming out. It's not necessarily about athletes overcoming certain disabilities to succeed in their chosen field, but about people living in a world that doesn't always seem catered for disabilities. And 10-speed in specifically is very passionate about representing all types of communities. So I would say that's the place. And yes, we would love to see more, and think it's very important part of publishing.
Lisa?
I agree. Would love to see more. We are open to it. Regarding the autoimmune and we have a lot of books on autoimmune disease actually on our list,
Awesome.
and addressing the health and dealing with that and healing from that in many different ways. So that is something that we've always had a focus on. Again, just with the sensibility of our list in health and alternative forms of healing. That is something we've always focused on. I mean, from Louise Hay, who founded our company, onward. And yeah, we are actively looking. I think, our interest does definitely perk a little because we are looking for different voices, neuro, different neurological or neurodegenerative disorders and things like that. So, yes.
I have another really dynamic question that's here. Having the opportunity and means to find space and time for wellness is a luxury that marginalized communities have more difficulty accessing. Certain activities are also costly. Activities like skiing quickly becomes cost prohibitive. Buying ski gear and lift tickets can quickly add up, which prices out certain communities from participating. Are costs of participating in wellness or fitness mentioned in books you have worked on? And if not, do you feel like they should be?
It's a great question. And actually it goes back to sort of the outdoor conversation we were having a little bit earlier too, the access to the outdoors, the cost of that, and the whole question about self-care. Is self-care something for everybody? Is healthy food something for everybody? So there is sort of a bifurcation in the society around what is affordable to some is not affordable to others, and access to health and well-being, not just medical services, but well-being in general, is a real challenge. You know, we don't have something on the list right now. I think it's a great idea to have that as another touchstone conversation in some form of a narrative. I think it's an essential conversation point.
Awesome. Anyone else would like to add on?
I think it's something we do try to address a lot in our wellness titles throughout. What we do, we have a specific one to that point. No, but I think it's more important that when we have authors who are talking about self-care and all of those things, that they are aware of what options they are offering and what is involved with that. And when you're looking at, when they have sort of step-by-step processes, want to be like, is that realistic that people can set aside that time? What are some options for people who don't have just hours and hours on hand, you know? So I think that's mostly how we try to address it, is just to make sure, again, sort of that is integrated into the mindset of how we approach our work and the work that's put out there.
Yeah, I would agree. I say I'm trying to be mindful whether I'm editing a recipe or I'm actually going to pivot a little bit and use a non-food related example, but I'm working on an interior design book that is about minimizing the clutter in your home and cutting down what you already have. And I think what she addresses something in the introduction that I think is really important, which is to acknowledge that not everybody has the luxury to minimize what they have. So not everyone has, you know, a large and cluttered home. And even if they did, not everyone wants to, you know, minimize everything down to like the bare minimum. So we encouraged this author, and she actually brought it up to us as well, to put in a large section in the beginning of the book to just respectfully and honestly and truthfully acknowledge that not everyone is coming at the minimalist lifestyle by choice. Some people don't have the stuff to even build up, and some people want to hold on to the stuff they have because they've never had that much stuff before and they don't want to cut it down. So, just acknowledging that, that everyone has their own path, and that we are, kind and respectful no matter what we're talking about, whether it be food or interior design or fitness. I think there's a place for that conversation in almost every book.
I want to be mindful of the panelist time, so I'm just going to take on 2 more questions. I want to kind of keep these a little bit short. So thank you for all of the amazing questions and answers on this panel. This has been very informative. This year has brought many parents closer to their children because they are now spending much more time with their children since everyone has started working remotely and going to school remotely. Wellness and fitness are typically thought of as individual pursuits and individual goals. Have you found after this year that people are looking for more material on how to pursue fitness and wellness as a family? If so, what does that look like? Maybe it's family meditation sessions or family 5K runs.
I'm trying to get away from my family.
Ditto.
I have 3 kids. I have 3 girls, and 2 of them are schooling at home, and 1 is not even old enough to be in school. So I still very much enjoy fitness as an individual pursuit, and like escaping to the garage to cycle is my only alone time that I get all day. That said, I'm living here in Berkeley, California, and hiking and walking are and always have been a very, strong family passion for us. So I would say we're doing a whole lot more walking as a family, especially when the kids are in school and, they have an hour off for lunch break. We're, trying to walk at least just around the block just to get some fresh air. So there definitely are some more family activities that we've been doing. I don't think I've seen any books particularly related to that. I don't know if that will continue when all the restrictions lift. Like I said, I very much value my alone time.
Ditto.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a different topic in the sense because usually when you focus on wellness, you got to figure yourself out first.
Right.
And so a lot of our books tend to focus on that, which is not to say that, clearly family bonding and all of that is very important, as well as a lifestyle. I think that's the more how it affects is like, developing the healthier lifestyle and sharing that with your family, or having that be a part of how you connect with each other. But so I think that would be how it would be more broadly applicable, more than say an individual title on, and that would be more, in the parenting category, which we do have some parenting books. I will say parenting books do address this, but not so much the overall wellness category generally.
Definitely. So I'm going to actually make this the last question of the evening, and I apologize to anyone who I've not reached their question. Though this has been touched on a bit already with the topic of female runners and marathoners, I was wondering if you noticed a trend towards books addressing female physical strength and body image. With the CrossFit and weightlifting and so many females perusing amazing careers in these areas, I was wondering if you think the fitness and wellness conversation is trending towards celebrating the physical strength of females instead of slimming down of their bodies. Would you like me to kind of like rephrase that again, or?
Well, I mean, I can answer a little bit.
Okay.
We have in the past published, a lot of content on strength training, and we really look for the natural body, is what it is. So I mean, we're not really looking for an idealized version. That's not really where we're coming from with the publications we have in the strength category. I think women enjoy strength training as much as men do, and so we have done it, and it's popular and remains popular. Actually, I've seen more of a lift in those categories, women strength and conditioning titles, than the men's strength and conditioning titles. I think it's a little overpublished on the men's side, and the women's side, there's more opportunity.
Definitely agree. Anyone else would like to add on?
I mean, our general focus more than strength would be, again, sort of the overall wellness and learning to judge that wellness, or analyze that wellness and put it within the frame of a healthy body and healthy mind together for our list. So it's kind of a hard question, because we don't really focus on conditioning strength training books so much. That's just not our lane.
That's fair. That's fair. Dervla, would you like to contribute to that?
I would say, same as Lisa, Rodale used to concentrate a lot when we were partnered with, when we also owned Runner's World and Men's Health and Women's Health. We saw a lot more of those kinds of strength training and conditioning books, and they did very well for us. But we're definitely seeing a move away from that right now, with more holistic cookbooks and mindfulness books, and less on that. But that said, I still see a fair number of proposals, so I can tell that there's still a great deal of interest and an uptick in that. And I hope that there is, a move towards accepting women's bodies for what they are, and, and celebrating the muscle too. That's fun also.
Thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate you guys and everyone that was able to actually stay in on this panel for a little while longer. Thank you so much for tuning in today. It's been amazing being your moderator, and it's been an absolute pleasure being able to talk to all of the panelists. I thank you so much for your time.
Oh, well, you're very welcome, and it's a great honor to be here. So thank you for including all of us.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank you.
I'm going to just jump in here at the end. Latoya, Andrew, Lisa, Dervla, thank you all so very, very much on behalf of the Book Industry Guild. This was such an interesting conversation, and I thank you all for challenging our perceptions of what is happening in this particular area of publishing right now. I think this conversation branched off into some very interesting sort of side conversations. And I think, Dervla, you're the one who said we should have another panel on this, and I completely agree. So again, on behalf of the Book Industry Guild, thank you all so very much. And
thank you, Karen.
For everybody out there, on March 16th, Tuesday, March 16th, we are going to be discussing comic books. So please join us next month for our panel on comic books. And I thank you all again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.